Hello, in this video we're going to talk about the product rule and how to know when to use the product rule and the steps to take the product rule. So what we need to first look at is Leibniz notation. D dx is the same thing as saying f prime of x. So we have prime notation and Leibniz notation. Typically we will use prime notation. It's just easier to work with rather than writing out Leibniz every single step. So how do we know if we have the product rule? As you can see, in any problem when you have x's in multiple places and there's ever a multiplication separating those x's, we have to use the product rule, which means we are going to use this formula every single problem. So I do recommend you write this down and memorize it. So let's get started. Let's look at our first problem, which is going to be this one. So when we have f prime of x, the first step is always going to be labeling your problem. This is key and will make it a lot easier to see where to plug in for f and what to plug in for g. So I'm going to say that this first portion is going to be my f, and then I'm going to say the second portion is going to be my g. Now this is a product rule, so we're dealing with products, which means it doesn't really matter what you choose for f and g, but really make sure you do the same thing every single time because it can get confusing if you start rotating your f's and your g's. So let's go ahead and plug into our formula. So this is my f and this is my g. So the first one in the formula is f prime of x. So we're going to write 3x squared minus 5x primed multiplied by our g, which is e to the x, plus we have our f of x again. This stays the same, 3x squared minus 5x. And now this is being multiplied by g prime. So our g is e to the x prime. One key to know that you're doing this right is your end terms will both have your prime notation. So that's kind of an easy way to remember it. Let's go ahead and keep going. F prime of x equals, okay, so I know with this tick mark, which is prime notation, I am going to take the derivative of just this section. So multiply down. This gives me 6x. We have to subtract 1 off the power, so it leaves with 6x minus 5. Just go ahead and copy your g. Now we're going to copy x or f again. So 3x minus 5x. And now we're taking the derivative once again on e to the x. So go ahead and multiply down. We have x e to the x. All right, from this point we can go ahead and simplify again. So we have f prime of x. And this is going to equal. Now I'm going to pull out my e to the x. So e to the x. Copy my 6x minus 5. That takes care of this, this, and this. However, we do have one x left over, so I'm going to go ahead and multiply that in. So plus 3x cubed minus 5x squared. And this is our final answer. So that's how you take the derivative using the formula. Let's go ahead and look at another one. So for the next problem, we have f of x equaling the square root of x times e to the x. Alright, so when we're looking at this problem, what we're looking for is what we're going to choose for our f and what we're going to choose for our g. So I'm going to say that this is going to be my f, and then I'm going to say this is going to be my g. So now we just need to plug in. So f prime of x. Go ahead and write it out every single time. So here's my f primed multiplied by my g plus in between. Go ahead and copy your f again. And now we have followed by g prime. Primed. Okay. So from here we can go ahead and simplify again. There are a few different ways to simplify when dealing with square roots. So I'll show you both ways here. So if I'm looking at the square root of x primed, this will turn into 1/2 square root x That's if you want to keep your square root. If you do not like working with square roots, you can go ahead and write it in the form of x to the 1/2 power primed. It's the exact same thing. It's just going to give us a little bit different of an outcome. So 1/2 x, we have to take our 1/2, subtract off by 1 to decrease our power. So this would be minus 2/2, which will leave a negative 1/2. So these are actually the exact same thing. It just depends if you like to work with fractions or roots. So let's go ahead and continue here. So we have f prime of x, and then we had 1/2 x to the negative 1/2. Multiply that by our g, which stays the same, plus, go ahead and keep your x to the 1/2 the same as well, and then multiply by our prime of g, which will give me x e to the x. Now if you notice here, I kept consistent throughout the entire problem. Try not to have one square root with another fraction because it just doesn't look very clean. Is it wrong? No, but it just doesn't look very clean, and it depends on your professor. They might mark you down on that. So from this point, you just have to simplify. So just be careful when you're first starting these problems. Make sure you go ahead and label your f's and your g's and go ahead and just plug right into that formula. It will be the same every single time. If you do have any questions, please leave a comment below. I'll do my best to answer those. If you have any specific problems you'd like me to solve, please leave those and I'll do my best to solve them. Until next time.